if you take the king's shilling, you fight the king's war.
How many times can a man turn his head and pretend that he just doesn't see?
And yet all of the proof is here that actually
Totally
everyone
agree.
is funded by Israel in America. And so you just go for Van Jones. I mean, I can't imagine going to bed every night and just realizing it doesn't matter how nice your house is, you're still a slave.
I mean, let's face it, Israel's lost the trust of Americans forever. That's just the case. The debate's over, and the 50-point swing in sympathy toward the Palestinians proves that. I can't say that about our political class, but Candace Owens, a pundit from the right, and Norman Finkelstein, an academic from the old left, get together here and discuss this issue. What led us to this point? How the Israel firsters are responding to it so desperately, in fact, and what does it tell us about the trajectory of American politics today? Let's take a look. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
You're still a slave. And
to advertise it, the yellow ribbon.
yeah.
Who wears the yellow ribbon?
Mm-hmm.
Does Ben Shapiro still wear it?
Did he used to wear it?
I think he used to.
I'm not sure.
But currently, this is 2 years later. I don't know anyone but he still wears it. Just to show, I'm sure it's in his contract. If you wear the yellow ribbon, an extra $1,000, a bonus, $1,000.
and that is, it's really important for people to know that how the dynamics work, because they do this through charity. And I know that there are other people that are working on a report on this now, because it's become so obvious of how they will even give people the permission, these influencers, to say, well, I'm not taking any foreign money. Okay, nobody expected that you were receiving a check from Bibi Netanyahu. What they do is they'll flood the zone and they'll give money to like the International Fellowship of Christian and Jews, or put money into a church. And then those individuals will then give money to influencers. It's like, it's such an obvious game. And I will say on the quote unquote Christian side of things, we're seeing that people are awakening to these pastors that are going on these multiple trips to Israel and coming back and telling their congregants that no matter what, they have to support Bibi Netanyahu. I mean, it's nutty, but I'm happy because it does seem as though we are reaching this inflection point where the correct people and the honest people, rather, who have been telling the truth for a very long time, are finally getting their day.
Totally agree with that. The American public are waking up to this so much more than any other time in my lifetime. It really is a source of hope in my life. You could look at my videos and come out thinking I'm the most cynical guy in the world, but this trajectory makes me very hopeful for the future of the United States, at least when it comes to the connection to the Israel first mentality. It's just losing out. Now, Candace is exactly right when she says that is how, the Israel lobby is getting away from this, the same way they get away with not having to register, under FARA for AIPAC, saying, this isn't foreign money. This is just American money. Well, it's Netanyahu's cutouts that act and have the same agenda as Netanyahu, are indistinguishable in all ways from Netanyahu and the Israeli regime, and represent that same agenda to the T. What is something that AIPAC or the Israel lobby paying these influencers, have that isn't in common with Netanyahu? No one can say that. Ted Cruz can't say that. Ted Cruz, when faced to ask this question, or answer the question that Tucker gave him when he said, hey, what's an example of something that AIPAC is lobbied for that the Israeli government doesn't want? He couldn't answer that. And that's just the truth.
I would say public opinion is shifting, for sure. I'll return to that in a moment. As I said, there's such a complete unwillingness to see the situation you're placed in when you are, you're just a slave for these folks. So you take the case of Barry Weiss, okay? And there are people who work in her outfit who are not Jewish. She wrote a little book. It was a stupid book. It was a comic. It wasn't a book. It's sort of I teach, and it was something you get from a paper from a freshman paper. And how does she end the book? Let me just quote. This is how it's a book about anti-Semitism and how to fight it. Like she knows about fighting anti-Semitism. Here she writes: This is the force of who we are. We are a people descended from slaves who brought the world ideas that changed the course of history. One God, human dignity, the sanctity of life, freedom itself. This is our inheritance. That is our legacy. We are the people commanded to bring light into this world. I mean, these are just, that's a passage you would, if you replace the proper noun, it's something you'd read in Mein Kampf.
I mean, that's exactly what it is. The most ardent and rigid forms of Zionism are Jewish supremacy. There's no other way to say that. And you wouldn't get away with saying that in any other direction than an ardent Zionist direction. It would be too politically incorrect to read that if it was coming from a different group. So Norman Finkelstein is exactly right here. And both of these two are correct when it comes to public support for Israel. It just is fading in every single way. We saw this recent Pew Research poll showing that over 50% of Americans, is actually almost 60%, have an unfavorable opinion of the Israeli government since this began. I'm telling you, that's a far cry from where America was on the day after October 7th. In 2023. And despite all the propaganda that just means so many Americans are siding with Hamas, this same poll, completely refutes that in every single way, showing that at least 8 in 10 in both parties view Hamas unfavorably. So sympathy for Hamas isn't the result of Americans fading away from the Israel First mentality. It just means they loathe the Israel First mentality, and they loathe what the Israeli government is doing, especially in Gaza. And many people have a problem with the connection to Israel in terms of the new war that Trump waged and is technically waging against Iran right now.
That's their mentality. These are Jewish supremacists. And what did they think of Van Jones? What's going through their head when they see a Coleman Hughes?
They'll never.
Where they think
They'll never
just
be us.
Complete contempt.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Complete contempt. Our slaves.
100%. Yeah.
It's pitiful. Really.
People are willing to subject themselves to slavery for the mighty dollar. People can be bought off. That is true about the pundit class, as we're seeing from influencers being paid $7,000 for these obvious pro-Israel posts that no one has called for, a free market. No one would desire that without having this massive, pro-Zionist donor platform through which to facilitate those funds. And it wouldn't happen in Congress either if congressmen were really beholden to the American First mentality, which is, proving itself to be a total charade when it is Israel First. People can get bought off. That's the tale of AIPAC. That's the tale of the banking lobby, the military-industrial complex. There's more lobbies than just AIPAC that can buy off politicians, but many of them are intertwined. Certainly the banks and the military-industrial complex, both of which profit from getting involved in Israel's wars and Israel's genocide.
And they could ruin those people in 4 seconds. It's like, you are literally our property. And I sensed that, because I do want to add this one element, like before October 7th, there were tons of people who were on the quote unquote pro-Israel side, like me, meaning never cared to look at the issue. Sounds okay. Basic. I'm not going to speak about this issue because I don't really know about it, and it's not relevant to speak about. Like I really entered in the scene of politics really intent on sort of waking up Black America to other layers of slavery, like, what we learned in the classroom, and constantly thinking that we have to marry ourselves to one party, and now I'm kind of through both and being like, actually, both sides are really bad. But
Amen.
Yeah, so it's I do want people to be forgiving and know that some people genuinely just don't know. But now we're not there. We're not at that point anymore. People don't know. They very much know, and they are making a conscious decision that the cash means more to them than the truth, that they are willing to allow children to be murdered and killed every day, plucked off in Gaza,
and joke about it,
and to tell jokes about it, and to spread lies about the condition that is happening. When you see, if you do not have a spiritual reaction to seeing those children that are starving every day, they will always pluck the one example of, this guy wasn't actually starving, and so therefore nobody's starving, and it is so plainly obvious that is untrue. Again, before October 7th, that would have been untrue.
Totally correct. The minds of Americans are awakening. We saw this from people seeing the footage coming out of Gaza on TikTok. That's why The Israel lobby was so desperate to have its allies buy out Twitter, like Andreessen Horowitz, like Larry Ellison, to want to capture that and prevent that from happening again, because that is responsible. Once people see this, they can't unsee it. You are seeing this awakening. And Candace is right. A lot of people truly don't know about this, don't pay attention to this issue. But, the last 2 years have opened a lot of American eyes. I thank the Lord for that profusely, because that wasn't available during, say, the Iraq War or the Vietnam War, when we didn't have videos, live streams coming out of Gaza and coming out of Iraq or Vietnam or other areas in which the U.S. military intervention was so horribly, exerted in, like Chile and other places. But that is the truth now. And confession time, I was once essentially where Candace was. I was once a neocon. I was once a Zionist. I turned away from that in 2004 as a young man. But I just was taken by all this propaganda. And it took actually looking at primary source material, searching for the truth, not what politicians and media pundits are saying, to really learn these lessons. And I think a lot of Americans are learning those lessons now. I'm not trying to boast about that whatsoever. There's nothing boastworthy. If you're new to opposing the U.S.-Israeli alliance, you're just as valuable as someone that knew for a long time. I want you as an ally, whether you're left, right, or center. This is a coalition that dissidents of all kinds can get behind. Leave all our other differences on the table. This is the big kahuna, if you ask me.
That you just wonder if these, I just don't know how they do it. I genuinely don't know how they do it, because I would rather lose everything, as I've proven, take it all, than to speak something that is untrue, because I know that my soul will pay a consequence for that.
As I said, 40% of American Jews are convinced Israel is committing genocide.
Yeah.
But Coleman Hughes doesn't see it.
Mm.
Van Jones doesn't see it. There is a British proverb, there are none so blind as those who will not see. And if you know the Bob Dylan song from my generation, Blow in the Wind, how many times can a man turn his head and pretend that he just doesn't see?
Wow, that's so powerful. But that, it's a great perception by Norman Finkelstein. How much does it take for people to continue to toe the pro-Israel line after exposure to all of this, after it's so clear as day, after it's so glaring how hypocritical it is for our politicians in the United States to have more fealty to this tiny country the size of New Jersey in the Middle East than they do to the fealty toward their own constituent bases, toward their own American states, which you can boycott and not be called anti-Semitic for. But if you boycott Israel, it opens up a whole new line of targeting by the regime. It's just the truth. Norman's right, and I think we need to think about this as a society. What does this mean if we continue in that direction? Thankfully, I don't think we are now. Thankfully, I think most Americans are diverting from it, even if they don't prioritize foreign policy in general or Israel at the top of their list of concerns. Their concerns do conflict with this mentality of focusing resources and wealth in the direction of Israel rather than their own home districts. It's just impossible to ignore.
Well, if the remuneration is enough, many times.
Well, I think that's also, and I know that you don't engage much on social media, and you also don't even have a cell phone, but I released this week, I sort of waited for everybody to lie, which they did, of course, they love lying, about Charlie Kirk and what he was going through in the end, and I released the text message chain 48 hours before he died, where he said, "They've left me no choice but to abandon the pro-Israel cause." And I really think that the best person that put it very plainly, if you lost Charlie Kirk, who was actually so committed to Israel, for him, as he started evangelical Christian, and then he couldn't unsee, and he said explicitly in his message, because of Jewish behavior. And we know what he meant. He didn't mean all Jews in America. It's like that power that we are talking about that happens, and the way they were treating him as if suddenly he woke up and realized, like I did, oh, I thought that you guys were supporting me because you were my friends. I thought you supported me because I will pursue the facts. I thought you supported me because you wanted me to have a platform because I will speak truth to power. And then when you turned around and realized, well, wow, I was just a slave to you. You view me as something other. And for Charlie, I think he was realizing at the end, or maybe he never understood it, that if you take the king's shilling, you fight the king's war.
Wow, but isn't that the truth? If you could lose Charlie Kirk from your side, and he was one of the most recognizable and, biggest figures on the right that was such a proponent of Zionism, talked about it all the time on his campus tours to the chagrin of, groypers that contested him on those issues on these college campuses. If you could lose Charlie Kirk, it's no surprise why Israel and the Israeli regime and Netanyahu's cutouts in the United States have lost the American public in general. Because Charlie doubled down on this. He was closely aligned policy-wise and in terms of politics and, basically orientation toward this Israeli regime as these other people. You could tell it was waning in his last months, and Candace was right to unveil his true feelings after so many of his quote-unquote friends like Josh Hammer lied about him, called him the most pro-Zionist martyr in the world after he says, I have no choice but to, quote, leave the pro-Israel cause, verbatim his words. If you lost him, you're going to lose America. And I think that's already been done. We're already turning the corner from that. Our political class hasn't, but Americans have turned.
Well, there's a proverb. I'm not familiar with that proverb, but there's he who pays the piper calls the tune.
And what do you do when you have a not-for-profit 501c3 that has taken millions of dollars? And Bob Shulman was one person who took $2 million away from him instantly if he didn't, start peddling the correct talking points about Israel. And he was just done in the end.
And threatening, Charlie, if you don't take Tucker Carlson off your speaking circuit, he would withdraw that money.
Then, he died. So it was no longer a problem, but they then rushed to misrepresent and to pretend that that period didn't happen. He literally told Bibi Netanyahu on the phone, no, because they were panicked about losing Charlie. He calls and invites him to Israel, and Charlie said no. And yet Bibi then rushed to lie, or I guess to not tell the whole truth when he says, I called him 2 weeks ago and invited him to Israel. It's like, and what did he say, Bibi? What did Charlie say back to you?
Yeah, the only part of that letter, by the way, which has been published, the entirety of it, we broke it down on this channel about a month ago when that came out. The only part of the letter he read was that he's a friend to Israel. And the rest of that letter was, hey, we're getting killed out here. Your propaganda, the Zionist propaganda, it isn't working. I'm not a good middleman. You need to have a better, scheme to refute a lot of these talking points that I'm getting. And it's fierce. And it's not popular toward Israel. It's hardly that at all. If you read that letter, you'll see what I'm talking about. He selectively, as Netanyahu always did, like a master manipulator, pulled out pieces that seem to, basically support his narrative and just ignore the entire rest of it. It's what Netanyahu always does.
So it is, we see that story playing out right now where you see the fight to make sure that they control people that genuinely, like me and Charlie, believe that they were just our friends and believed in our mission to just tell the truth no matter what that truth is. Which means that naturally, if you're interested and committed to truth, your perspectives will change with more information, which is what happened to me. My perspective changed because, well, not even more information, just information in general, in large part thanks to the work that you're doing and people like Dave Smith. And yeah, it really woke me up to what happened there.
There is the money issue, and then the money issue is combined with the wholesale assault on academic freedom and on freedom of speech. So we'll just take a recent example. There were several young people, they were what's called non-citizen immigrants here, people like Mahmoud Khalil at Columbia University. And they were rounded up, sent off to strange places. In some cases were things like literally writing an op-ed in the tough school newspaper. That's it. critical of the administration because of its support of Israel, de facto support of Israel.
Yeah, that's right. You can't even be critical of Israel. And that's what gets you targeted for deportations, despite the mantra of the right leading up to Trump's ascension to power, is that we were going to have mass deportations on the basis of illegal immigration. Instead, many of Trump's deportation have been focused specifically on legal residents just for being critical of Israel, as Mahmoud Khalil was in Columbia University for daring not to tout the pro-Israel line. You know, maybe he said free Palestine. Maybe he said that too. But that's akin to anti-Semitism to much of this establishment regime too. It's totally criminal. It's a total attack on freedom of speech in so many ways. And it's very selective in its enforcement mechanisms aimed toward those kind of critics. Well, you could use that kind of power against any dissident group that the government chooses, and those kind of precedents are lasting ones. They're the same precedents that they used when they said, hey, the Patriot Act, we're just going to target terrorism, and NSA mass surveillance, we're just going to target terrorists. Well, it turns out, as Edward Snowden, notified us of, that was turned inward against all of us. Mass bulk data collection schemes. And that's the same thing you're seeing here. And man, if it just doesn't say it perfectly, I don't know what does, when you just can't have a society based upon those precepts. And in some ways, money and politics are at odds. It doesn't matter what ideology we're talking about here, because in politics, narrative matters more than truth. It just does. People can be paid off. The entire last century in American politics shows it, especially since the progressive era. That is what we are seeing with these massive lobbying groups buying off our politicians. Israel's not the only one, but it is a major one.
And there was 2 weeks ago, a decision came down in Eastern District Court on this whole case with these guys, okay, who were arrested by ICE, put in strange places. The guy who wrote the decision, his name is Judge Young. He was a Reagan appointee. So we're not talking about a Hamas supporter, a Reagan appointee. And he wrote a 161-page decision. And he said, non-citizen immigrants, they have the right to free speech. That's in our jurisprudence. They have that right. Number two, he said they didn't say anything that crossed any line. They supported the Palestinians. They didn't support Israel.
But they say that that's de facto support for Hamas. If you support the Palestinians, that's de facto support for Hamas. That's the right-wing talking point used to condemn all these people. They're with the terrorists. It's the same thing they did in the run-up to the Iraq War and in the run-up to the 20-year occupation of Afghanistan. If you're not with us, you're against us. You must be a secret bin Laden sympathizer. That might be true for a very small subsection of Americans, but the truth is, people have just had it with Israel. By and large, that's the reason. And that Pew Research poll shows that. There isn't a lot of sympathy for Hamas. It's just a mass drop of support for this criminal, genocidal Israeli regime.
This is America. You have the right to free speech. You yourself might be surprised. Our Supreme Court has ruled you have the right to advocate the violent overthrow of our government. The violent overthrow of our government. You have that right. That's what our Supreme Court ruled. Our Supreme Court ruled you have the right to burn the American flag.
Yeah, that's true too. Both of those things are extensions of freedom of speech. You might not like that, and you have every right to criticize that. In fact, you have every right to rake someone over the coals that supports that if you want. But I don't know, Jefferson supported that, the idea that a government that doesn't protect life, liberty, and property can be abolished by the people when it suits their interests. That is the key precept of the Declaration of Independence. I know it's not taught that way anymore. But, the federal courts get things wrong all the time. But if you look at some of the cases in which they have sided on the side of free speech when it comes to flag burning, and which, by the way, the founders did not consider flags to be sacramental objects nor did they consider, like, the Capitol building to be a holy temple, by the way, in the same way that our civic religion preaches that it is today. But, you know, these things are just part of our heritage. Our heritage is rebellion. Rebellion is woven into the American spirit. It's the American tapestry. It's the story of our lineage. The fact that we rebelled, and it took mass assembly, mass dissemination of new radical ideas, and things that were controversial because they attacked the ruling class to make that future possible. That's just the case. And I'm so glad these two are sitting down together and having this conversation. It really is the epitome of what is possible. What is possible when dissidents on both the right and the left shelve all other differences on every other issue, as these two are, by the way. Norman Finkelstein's an old school communist. He'll tell you that. Candace Owens is absolutely not. She comes from the American right that doesn't believe in that. But the two can share a kindred association when it comes to the importance of this issue and the importance of eschewing the Israel First mantra, which is so pervasive in our political system today, in our bureaucracy, in our executive branch, in Congress with AIPAC, you know, getting special carve-outs, you know, not having to register under FARA and openly boasting about how they kind of control the voting patterns of 361 representatives in Congress. And if you don't believe me, look at their website. They do exactly that. Even as Israel enacts and imposes a genocide on our bankroll, with the U.S. giving them about $32 billion since October 7th. It's just so backward when you consider all the problems Americans have to deal with here at home. And then you have dual citizens in Congress that don't even have to divulge they are such. Many of them have Israeli citizenship in addition to American citizenship. Well, I say Tucker Carlson called that one right when he said a man cannot serve two masters. There are cases in which the interests of Israel and the United States will diverge. And I want to know the ones that pick Israel over the United States. That is partially clear, but it'd be even more clear if we knew which representatives had allegiances to Israel. But I just think this interview was so valuable in so many ways. I really recommend you watch the rest of it. And you can do that on Candace's channel. But what do you think? Do you think I'm right about this? Is this a really important single issue coalition? Did the two make good points? What do you think about where this is going and how it will affect our political system in the years to come? Let me know down below. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, also subscribe to Candace. Thank you, Candace. Great interview with Norman, who is also an academic hero. I don't side with him on every issue, obviously, too, but the two are heroes as far as I see it. And if you like this video, please consider becoming a YouTube member. You can do that by clicking the join button below. If you do that, I'll give you access to all my videos before they go live to the general public on YouTube. Also, if you want a free copy of my book, Compact of the Republic, click the link in the description below. You'll get shot off to a site, plug in your email, and I'll send that book to you in PDF form for completely free, no obligations there. That tells the story of how the United States was once a country that didn't embrace all these entangling alliances like the one that's destroyed the American political system when it's aligned with Israel above all other considerations. And until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Peace out, guys. Catch you in the next one.